This story takes place one night when I stopped for gas on my way home from work. I worked at a restaurant, so I was usually there until late, sometimes after midnight. This time it was about 11:30 at night. I would pass this gas station every day on my way home from work, and I'm pretty sure it was open 24/7. The store part of the gas station was bigger than most. It was almost like a tiny grocery store because it had a decent selection of food, not just the junk food and snacks like some others. This place even had a tiny produce aisle. Because of that, I would often pick up some things there after filling up my car, since other places in the area were usually closed at the time. I was walking down the aisles of the store while my car was parked outside. I filled my basket with a few of the essentials that I always buy: bananas, eggs, and bread. Then I walked around for a while trying to decide if there was anything else that I wanted. I eventually made my way to the till and paid for my gas, as well as the grocery items. Then I walked out the large glass door at the front of the store. I could see that my car was parked next to one of the pumps. The parking lot was dark, but the bright lights from the gas pumps were like a bright oasis. I started walking towards my car, and as I got closer, I could tell that there was somebody sitting in my back seat. I don't usually lock my doors when I go in, because it's usually pretty quick. But this time I was in there for a while, longer than normal. Also, my car is pretty old, so you have to lock them all manually. I inched closer to get a look at the person. It appeared to be an older woman, hunched over. Her hair was covering most of her face, and the shade from the roof of my car formed a dark corner in the back seat where she was sitting, so it was hard to tell much about her. My first thought was that it was an elderly woman who wandered into my car, confused. I stood a few feet away from the car while I thought about the situation. I considered simply giving her a ride to wherever she was going. I'm always willing to help people in need, but some part of me thought that was not a good idea. After a minute or two, I decided to call the police. I hate to get the police involved for something like this, and I made sure that they knew it was not an emergency or anything. Also, I did not want to press any charges. When the police arrived, I talked to the officers for a few minutes. After that, they told me to wait by the building to give them some distance. I couldn't see much from there, and the bodies of the two police officers were blocking what little view I might have had. I could tell that they opened the back door of my car, and before I knew it, they had pulled the person out of the back seat and put her in handcuffs. I thought that was unnecessary, so I ran over shouting for them to stop. In my mind, it was just a confused old woman who wandered into my car by accident, but as I got closer, I could tell that it was not a woman at all. It was an older man, probably 50 or 60 years old, with long gray hair and several large tattoos on his face and hands. For some reason that I never figured out, he seemed to be wearing a hospital gown over his clothes. I stopped in my tracks when I realized that. Then one of the officers yelled at me to stay back. I backed up a few steps and continued to watch in disbelief. My heart sank when I noticed something. When the man was being frisked, I saw them remove a large hunting knife from under his clothes. He was definitely planning something for me, something that I wanted no part of. It's very scary to think that I almost got into the car with that guy sitting back there. Luckily, I made the right decision, and I survived. This happened just over a month ago. I was hanging out at my friend Jaden's house with some other guys. There were 5 or 6 of us there. I lived kind of far away, but everyone else lived in his neighborhood. I brought my dad's car to get there. My friends all had a few drinks, but I had to drive, so I couldn't. At around midnight, we called it a night, and I hopped into the car and said goodbye to my friends. My dad always lets me borrow his car, but he asks that I put some gas in to make up for what I use. A fair rule. I was driving down one of the larger streets in my town. There were stores and restaurants on both sides. All were closed for the night, though. It was quite deserted. I noticed a gas station on the right, and I figured it was as good a place as any to fill up. I pulled into the farthest pump. As I got out, I noticed a car at the station. It was the only other one there. I looked over to it as I was filling up my car. It was dark blue with tinted windows. I couldn't see anybody inside, but the headlights were on, so I figured someone was there. As I was getting back into the driver's seat, I saw the car pull up next to me. The front window rolled down. The driver was wearing a mask. I couldn't see his face. He didn't say anything, and neither did I. It was really awkward. I tried to start my car and get out of there, but I fumbled with the ignition. I finally got my car started and began driving. After a few minutes, I looked back and I saw that the car was behind me. My first thought was to drive to the police station. That's what my mom always told me to do in a situation like this. I felt like I was driving in circles, lost in the middle of nowhere. I tried to keep calm. The fear was overwhelming. I had meandered all the way into a very rural area. There were farm fields on either side with tall corn stalks closing in on the road. I felt trapped, and I was, but all I could see was darkness. I couldn't see any landmarks or signs. The operator tried to help me, but I could hear the frustration in her voice. I knew I was in trouble. Suddenly, my headlights fell upon a large green tower that had the name Miller painted on the side. I excitedly told the operator, and she seemed to think that it was enough for the police to find me. I kept driving for several more minutes. That's when I saw a flicker of light in the distance. It was a police car. I honked the horn, hoping that they would see me. The police car approached, and the other car fled. I felt really relieved when I noticed that. The police officer got out of his car and asked me if I was okay. I told him everything, and we talked for a few minutes. He asked me if I wanted to press charges, but I declined. I just wanted to get home and forget the whole thing. The car was gone anyway. I didn't know if they could find him, and if they did, he would have just lied and said nothing happened. When I finally got home, I collapsed on the couch and tried to calm down. My heart was still racing, and I felt like I was in a daze. I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep that night, so I turned on the TV and tried to distract myself. Then I went into my room and played some video games. I ended up going to sleep when the sun was coming up. The night shift at the gas station was always quiet and uneventful, but that's what I liked about it. I was the only one working, and I had the place to myself. I would stock the shelves, clean the floors, and wait for the occasional customer to come in. It was the perfect job for someone like me who enjoyed the solitude of the night. But tonight was different. The weather was terrible. A raging storm was sweeping through the area and the power had gone out. I was stuck in the gas station alone after dark. I tried to keep busy, but the silence was deafening. All I could hear was the muffled noise from the heavy rain. As the storm raged on, I started to hear strange noises coming from outside. I tried to ignore them, but they were getting louder and closer. I could hear something scratching at the door, and I knew I had to investigate. I grabbed my flashlight and slowly made my way to the door. When I opened it, a gust of wind blew in, drenching me in rain. I couldn't see anything in the darkness, but I could hear something breathing heavily. I froze, not sure what to do. And then out of nowhere, a figure burst into the store. I stumbled back and fell to the ground. I was sure I was going to die. But as the figure got closer, I managed to get a look at him. All I could see was a dark outline, but it was a man, a giant of a man. He was at least 6'5" with wild hair and a bushy beard. He wore a large coat, but even without it, I'm sure he would have been huge. I scurried behind the counter and sounded the alarm, but I knew help was minutes away, and I didn't have minutes. I scanned the place for the guy, but I lost him. I could hear him, though, and his movements sounded close. I knew that I had to find a weapon, something to defend myself. Found a baseball bat and brandished it in front of me. The man let out an amused laugh and lunged at me again. I swung the bat with all my might, and it connected with him and made a sickening thud. He let out a final cry and fell to the ground, motionless. I couldn't tell where I got him, but I didn't want to stay and find out. I ran out of that place and down the street. I was drenched in rain in less than a minute. Suddenly, I noticed the flashing red and blue lights that I had been waiting for. It felt like an eternity since I had called, but looking back, I know it was probably less than 5 minutes. I walked back to the store to meet the police. When I got there, my attacker was gone. I turned over the surveillance footage to the police, but since the power was still out, we couldn't watch it on the spot. However, the police were never able to find the guy. I was lucky to have escaped with my life, but I know that I'll never be the same again. The memory of that night will haunt me forever, and I'll always be looking over my shoulder. wondering when the man will return. I quit my job at the gas station and never went back. I had been working at a local gas station for a few years at the time. It was the job I had throughout high school and after graduation. I kept it for a year or two while I was figuring some things out. I started doing the night shift when I no longer needed to get up for school. The pay was better, and I also preferred it for some other reasons. The store never got really busy at night. The pumps were automated and almost everyone paid at the pump instead of coming in, so it was pretty easy. That, and I was a bit of a night owl anyway. Some would say that I was a video game addict, and they would be right. I was pretty much nocturnal anyway, so the choice to do the night shift was pretty easy. The gas station was on the corner of a quieter street. There were 4 pumps out at the front and a pair of dumpsters at the side. I would take the garbage out every morning at the end of my shift, and the garbage truck would come and empty them right after, as I was leaving for the day, at 5 a.m. It was close to 4 a.m., and quiet so far. I don't think I saw more than 3 or 4 customers in the 6 hours that I'd been on duty. I stood behind the counter staring at my phone. I used this time to do some reading and browse social media. The empty store was silent apart from a dull hum from the fluorescent lights that hung overhead. I looked up from the screen of my iPhone when a car pulled into the parking lot. It was an older Pontiac with some noticeable dents and a green paint job with several rust spots. One strange thing was that the headlights were out. It was very dark, and driving around without headlights was downright dangerous at this time. It didn't go to one of the pumps, and I couldn't see where it parked. Thinking it was just somebody turning around, I went back to my phone. Not more than a few minutes later, I heard a loud crash from the side of the building where the dumpsters are. It sounded like someone had opened the lid and slammed it against the side of the building. Whoever was in that car must be throwing something out, I thought. People do that from time to time. It's not allowed, so I usually go out there and tell them that they can't use the dumpsters. I walked out from behind the counter and out the front door. As I made my way closer, a chill ran down my spine. Something felt wrong. Although I wasn't sure what it was, I decided to proceed with caution. I nervously peeked around the corner and saw the car parked in front of the garbage area. A dark figure stood next to the car, but I couldn't make out anything about him. It was too dark. I stood there for several seconds watching, but I couldn't tell what he was doing, although I know he must have been throwing something away. There was just something about this guy that gave me the creeps. I can't explain exactly what it was about him, but for some reason, I decided not to make myself known. I quietly crept back into the store and went back to my post behind the counter. A feeling of relief struck me when I saw the car drive out past the pumps. There was not another customer for the rest of my shift, which was only about another hour. Like I said, I take the garbage out every morning before I finish, so I gathered the few scraps of trash that were in each of the garbage bins throughout the store and packed them into a single, large black garbage bag. I flipped the light switch on the other side of the building where the dumpsters were. While I was walking to the dumpster, I remembered the creepy guy from an hour before. Although it didn't occur to me to check what he had thrown out, I realized that I was about to find out. The bright bulbs shone down on the green bins like spotlights, as if they were an exhibit at some kind of a strange modern art gallery. I had to squint my eyes as I approached. When I reached the closest bin, I swung open the large lid, and it crashed on the side of the building, causing that familiar noise. Before throwing the bag in, I leaned over and looked inside. What I saw left me so shocked that I dropped the garbage bag on the ground. There was a pile of black garbage bags, and at least one of them was dripping with a red liquid. I had seen enough. I ran into the store and locked the door, then hid behind the counter. I frantically called 911 and told the operator everything, my hands shaking so much that I could hardly hold the phone. The police arrived quickly after, and sure enough, there was a body in the dumpster. I did my best to give them a description of the guy, but like I said, it was so dark without the lights on that I couldn't really tell what he looked like. I was, however, able to give them a description of the car, and based on that, they were able to track the guy down and arrest him. As of this time, he's awaiting trial for murder, and I'm expecting to testify as a witness. I've seen some strange things while working the night shift, but this is by far the scariest,